This hour of HQ presented by Geico, looking at the AFC East, and everybody got some kind of a B grade from Pete Prisco for the draft. The Dolphins getting the best grade, a B+. Bills with a B, Patriots and Jets with B minuses. Let's get Pete Prisco in here along with Brady Quinn, going to answer some of the biggest remaining questions for these teams in the AFC East. Patriots drafted Drake May, but all the teams who took a quarterback, you would think that this team has to be the one with the most questions to answer when you think about, the Bears, the Vikings, maybe even the Broncos. Pete, Brady, what do you think? I'll go to you first on this one.
Oh, there's no doubt. They've got a ton of questions to answer. The first in my mind, beyond what the roster looks like, is this the worst team in the AFC East? I mean, we used to give the New England Patriots the benefit of the doubt because of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, then maybe Bill Belichick. But now it's the Draw Mayo era, and we've got a rookie quarterback in Drake May who's going to be the guy moving forward. And this is a roster that, in comparison to the other three teams in the division, I don't think I'd take it over any of the three. So they've got an uphill battle ahead of them as they start this new era and as far as what it's going to look like. Now, they've definitely improved the roster in some ways, but it feels like maybe this year is still rebuilding to get the roster to where it needs to be in order to compete. But the reality of it is, I think it's going to be tough, especially if the Jets are as good as I think they can be. The Dolphins, who were a playoff team last year, were super talented. And obviously the Buffalo Bills, who Pete still has as top of the division.
You look at Drake May, and when you have a young quarterback, if he plays, and we don't know when he's going to play, it might take a little while, but if he doesn't play, whoever plays, the glaring problem for this organization is left tackle. It's a major issue. They drafted Caden Wallace out of Penn State. He was a right tackle. He's going to move to the left side and compete there. But who else can start there? Vidarian Lowe? I mean, they don't have a lot of good players to compete at that spot. So I look at the offensive line as a whole. It can be solid from the 4 over, but that left tackle spot is a major problem, and they have to get that thing solved in a hurry.
Moving on to the New York Jets, their first 5 picks in the draft were all on offense, including Olu Fashanu as an offensive lineman with their first pick. But Pete, why are you worried about the guys that Aaron Rodgers might be throwing the ball to?
Well, you look at tight end. There's not a great tight end receiving threat there, so that's a concern. We'll start there. But wide receiver, you have Mike Williams. Wilson's fine. We know he's a star, but Mike Williams is coming off a major injury. He's not a guy who can really run. They drafted Corley. I think that one could work out for him, but maybe one other. Somewhere they find a way to get another one in there. Alan Lazard was a disaster last year. He was brought in because he's Rodgers' friend. He can't run at all. He never could. But the reality is they need a little more speed on the outside, particularly with the concern about Mike Williams coming off the injury. And we don't know where he is or what he can do. He's never been a guy who's been a burner. So I look at this team and I see a lack of speed other than Wilson.
Well, it's a boomer bust year for the New York Jets. We talked about them earlier in the show. My question really is, can they truly be a Super Bowl contender with a healthy Aaron Rodgers? I think they've improved this roster mightily in shoring up the protection, shoring up, even providing a couple of weapons around Aaron Rodgers. And defensively, we know they're going to be good. The question just comes down to whether or not this team can meet expectations, which are sky high. Now, they don't have to deal with the distraction of Hard Knocks, and that's welcomed, I'm sure, by everyone in the room. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be a bullseye or a target on their back because Aaron Rodgers is finally back healthy. We get to see more than just 4 plays like we saw last year. But I think with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, this team, as good as this roster can be a Super Bowl contender. And I do think they're going to win the division.
Pete Prisco has them 11th in his power rankings. That's 4 spots ahead of the Miami Dolphins, who come in 15th. I thought Pete might be wondering something about Tua. Maybe he would be one of the questions this offseason. I guess he's answered some of those questions for you because you're looking on the defensive side.
Well, the question remains for Tua is what's his deal look like and how do they pay him? They're going to pay him. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I mean, that's essentially what it is with Tua. So I left that one alone. I'm going to the defensive side. They lost Christian Wilkins, and they went out and signed a bunch of veteran players, Benito Jones, Neville Gallimore, guys like that, Deshaun Hand. But is that enough to fill that spot? And I don't think it is. I think that's a real problem for them. And you look at their draft, you don't see any interior defensive linemen on there. And that is worrisome to me when it comes to their draft and it comes to those guys. Those older veterans that they sign, one of them has to step up and become a real quality starter on the inside.
And I think they will, Pete. I mean, look, they took a big crack, or big swing, I should say, at free agency this year, in particular on defense. You mentioned about Jones and Gallimore, but they also added Jordan Brooks, who I think will help them against the run. Jordan Poyer is a safety that's very capable of helping out against the run. You know, they added Fuller, they had Shaq Barrett off the edge. I think if there's questions about the defense, they were mightily improved, at least by what they did in free agency, and then adding Chop Robinson and Mo Kamara as well off of the edge to help out with that group. So I'm not so concerned about the defense. I'm more concerned about the offensive line. Can they protect Tua? They answered that question with, adding guys like Aaron Brewer, who are playing the interior, and Jack Driscoll, I think, can add some depth there. They drafted Patrick Paul in the second round out of Houston, so maybe he can help. But is that enough to protect Tua and give him time to get the ball to some of these explosive playmakers that we know they have? And so my big question for the Miami Dolphins is, I think after seeing them last year and what they're capable of being is, can they beat and can they be one of the best teams in the AFC? I think looking at last year's schedule, the way they played, people have a lot of questions about that. Maybe those questions are more aligned with what they think of Tua. I don't have as many questions about him. I think it's more about just whether or not this team can truly be one of the best teams in the AFC and truly compete for the conference title.
He doesn't have any questions about the quarterback. There's a big surprise. I mean, what are we going to do? If he would have had a question about the quarterback, then my gosh, we would have had it would have been a newsflash.
What's the question? What's the question, Pete?
Well, he doesn't show up in the big moments. He didn't show up in the big moments last year. I mean, he
did.
Big
moments in the playoffs?
In big games, big playoffs, he didn't show up. He didn't do anything.
Okay, well, I wouldn't agree with that necessarily. You're talking about a playoff game that was 30 below or whatever. So, yes, I guess if they have to go on the road in cold degree weather, they're going to be in trouble. They're going to have a hard time. I think we know that now, don't we?
And by the way, he listed off about 22 defensive players that they've added. There wasn't one defensive interior player that he mentioned, was there? Right, which is exactly what I said.
Benito Jones and Neville Gallimore. I actually admitted you already talked about it, Pete. Why did I need to go back to it?
Well, you said they did this and this and this, but what I said is they didn't really address the defensive interior with a good quality defensive lineman. That's all I'm saying. They added a bunch of backups.
Defensive tackle defender?
Brady They're going to be starters.
Let's move on to the Bills. Pete has them as the top team in this division once again this season. No Stephon Diggs. You go out and you get Keon Coleman to start this second round. You say that's far from enough, though, at that position. What else do you think they need to do?
In my mind, it isn't. I look around that position. I look at it. Look, Shakir's there. He's a good player, and I think he's going to get better. But I think they need more help, and I think they will look around. For example, Zay Jones was released by Jacksonville. There's a guy who can run a little bit. You get him for the right price, you maybe take a look at him. He's been around there before, by the way. So I think, I don't know if they would have another go-around, but I do think they need to address wide receiver again somewhere with a veteran to try and get some more help for that group.
It's a new era in Buffalo. They moved on from a lot of the playmakers, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, even the guys in the secondary like Jordan Poyer, Trey White. Obviously, they made Joe Brady the official offensive coordinator going into the season after taking over for Ken Dorsey last year. So a lot of changes going on in Buffalo. I think it kind of begs the general question, have they hit their ceiling, or are they able to continue to keep climbing even though they've had to restructure a lot of things to fit under the cap and make some of those moves this offseason? So I don't want to say a new look Bills, but a lot of new faces there. I'm more curious about this team, I think, than anything else as to what they can potentially be. Pete's just going to keep saying, well, they've got Josh Allen, so they've got a shot. He's not wrong, but the reality is he needs more help. And we've seen that from time and time again with a lot of the top quarterbacks are, as good as they are, they still need protection. They still need weapons. They still need the defense to step up in big moments. And that's a lot of the concerns that I have right now with this roster is Keon Coleman going to be enough? Can they add someone like a Zay Jones? Will that be enough to add the firepower they need to compete with the likes of a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who we know they're going to have to go through in order to get to a Super Bowl?
But, and Brady's not wrong, but Kincaid and Knox weren't together. I think they missed a bunch of games between the two of them combined. Get Kincaid for a second year. I mean, he's going to be that much better. So I think they'll scheme, they'll run the ball. Their offensive line's better. Don't worry about the Buffalo
Patrick
Bills.
Mahomes is able to win without wide receivers. If Josh Allen's as good as you say he is, maybe he should be able to do it as well. Pete, Brady, thank you so much as we look at some of the biggest questions for the teams in the AFC East, with the Bills slight favorites over the Dolphins and the Jets not far behind, way down to the Patriots at 22-1 with a win total of 5.5.